Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about The Eyes of Heisenberg by Frank Herbert. This was published in 1966 and was originally serialized in Galaxy magazine. This story is set in the future, where surgeons routinely tamper with the genes of every fetus and occasionally manage to tweak the gene of immortality into action and produce something called an Optiman. These immortals live in a separate city. They rule everything and they're considered the peak of humanity. However, they are not able to reproduce, so rely on regular people to replenish their ranks or add to their ranks. All babies are vat-produced. Biological pregnancy is no longer a thing, presumably forbidden by the Optimen to remove any aspect of inferiority or vulnerability from them in the eyes of the general population. But a geneticist at the start of the book, altering the genes of an embryo, discovers a gene that makes it, in the eyes of the Optimen, dangerous enough to go to war over. And there's a lot of debate and accusation from a lot of different parties about whether this genetic change was influenced from outside or was a complete random event. So the title is a reference to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which, as I understand it, means the observation of a system, in this case on two levels, the genetic level and the societal level that this book is set in, will disturb the system enough that you can never completely define it. And the more you try and study each individual bit of a system, the madder the whole system and the other parts get. And I think the title, The Eyes of Heisenberg, is really used here to personify it and try and make it an active influence, maybe sort of a mysterious force. So first off, as is the case with a lot of 60s science fiction, there is an awful lot of science jargon, and I'm always unsure with this whether it is to make the book sound more sciencey, or it comes from a period where science fiction was more than anything else marketed at people who already had an interest in science. Once you can get past this quality, and I think it is a wall for a lot of people that find it a struggle to power through. It is a genre and a period from which you get a lot of thought-provoking stories and themes. I think the themes in this book are: be very careful about deifying anything, because you never know what your status in its eyes will be. Nature fights back, life finds a way, and the idea of how dangerous progress can be when there's denial about not being in control and not recognizing when the control is taken out of your hands. The idea that living forever and living in terms of enjoying life's experiences are not two things that can exist hand in hand. On that note, it does seem like in literature, in a lot of cases, there seems to be an overarching idea that immortals are bored, and immortality, with that there comes an inability to change with the times. I wonder if this is a very human thing to write, to say if we lived forever, it would have to suck in some way to sort of elevate the fact that we don't, as a sort of way to tell ourselves, oh, we're not missing out, it would be rubbish, don't worry. There are some Aldous Huxley vibes in here in a big way, exploring sexuality, the idea of upbringing and genetic predetermination. And having been written in the 60s, the aesthetic is, in my head, 100% Logan's Run, and those are two things that marry very well for me. There were definitely some good ideas, some really nice scene building in this, descriptions of what the environment would be like, I thought was done very well. One thing that did disappoint me was that a lot of the character motivations were explained by events, very briefly explained by events that happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago, that tragically I think would have made actually more interesting stories than this story. Like references to, I think the best one was a reference to a war that happened between Optimen and cyborgs, which would have been the two next generation steps of humanity sort of warring it for dominance, like who's better. And I think that could have made a really compelling series even. I am a big Dune fan, and this does not read like Dune. And I think while the themes of this book are interesting, it is not a particularly exciting book. And I do think they slapped author of Dune on the front to get the sales. I don't think it's one I'm going to read again. I would recommend it to anybody, obviously, who's a huge sort of Logan's Run mid-20th century sci-fi fan, because it's got a very similar feel. 4 out of 10. On a side note, I do feel that if the Dune adaptation, the movie adaptation that's coming out later this year, actually does do really well, we may well have a bit of a Frank Herbert renaissance, and we'll start seeing very short stories like this maybe published in collections, which could be something nice, sort of exposure for an author's very less known work. So maybe something to look forward to if this review sounded good to you. But yeah, that's it. If you've read this, what did you think? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe. There's more on the way, as always. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're doing alright in isolation. I'll see you soon.